March 15, 44 BCE. Inside the Roman Senate, the most powerful man in the world walked toward his own death, surrounded by men he called friends. Within minutes, Julius Caesar would be dead, stabbed 23 times by his own senators. This is the story of how Rome's most powerful man was murdered by the very government he ruled, and how his death changed the course of history forever. To understand Caesar's death, we first have to understand his rise. Julius Caesar wasn't born into Rome's most powerful family. He clawed his way up through decades of political maneuvering, military brilliance, and sheer ambition. As a general, Caesar conquered Gaul, modern-day France, in a series of brutal, brilliant campaigns that made him enormously popular with the Roman public, and enormously wealthy. But that popularity terrified Rome's ruling elite. The Senate, dominated by aristocratic families, saw Caesar's growing power as a direct threat to the Republic itself, a system built specifically to prevent any single man from becoming too powerful. In 49 BCE, the Senate ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, stripped of his command. Caesar refused. Instead, he led his legions across the Rubicon River, the sacred boundary no general was legally allowed to cross with an army. It was an act of open rebellion. There was no turning back. Caesar's famous declaration, "The die is cast," marked the beginning of a civil war that would tear the Roman Republic apart and ultimately end it forever. Caesar won decisively. His rival Pompey was defeated and later assassinated in Egypt. By 45 BCE, Julius Caesar stood utterly unopposed, the single most powerful man in the entire Roman world. The Senate, unable to stop him, instead showered him with honors, praetor, consul, and finally, in February 44 BCE, dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. Yet for ordinary Romans, Caesar's rule brought real, tangible benefits. He reformed the calendar itself, creating the Julian calendar, the very foundation of the one we still use today. He expanded citizenship, funded massive public building projects, and redistributed land to war veterans and the poor. The more popular Caesar became with the common people, the more dangerous he appeared to Rome's aristocratic Senate, a growing divide that would soon prove fatal. For many senators, that title was the final straw. Rome had overthrown its last king nearly 500 years earlier. The very idea of a permanent, singular ruler was, to Rome's aristocracy, a betrayal of everything the Republic stood for. A conspiracy began to form, quietly, dangerously, among men who called themselves the liberators. Their goal, assassinate Caesar, and save the Republic from what they saw as tyranny. At the center of the plot were two men, Gaius Cassius Longinus, a sharp, calculating military commander who despised Caesar's growing power, and Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar considered one of his closest, most trusted allies. Some ancient historians even suggested Brutus may have been Caesar's own illegitimate son, though this remains debated. What's certain is that Caesar trusted him deeply, which made Brutus's involvement in the plot all the more devastating. Eventually, over 60 senators joined the conspiracy, an extraordinary number, revealing just how widespread fear and resentment of Caesar's power had become within Rome's own government. The conspirators chose their moment carefully, the Ides of March, March 15, a Senate meeting where Caesar would be present without his usual bodyguards, as was custom inside the sacred Senate walls. According to ancient sources, Caesar had received warnings. A soothsayer had famously told him to beware the Ides of March. His wife, Calpurnia, reportedly had nightmares the night before and begged him not to attend the Senate that day. Caesar dismissed the warnings. He had survived battles, betrayals, and a civil war. What danger could possibly await him inside Rome's own Senate house? On the morning of March 15, 44 BCE, Julius Caesar walked into the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting that day, and took his seat. The conspirators surrounded him under the pretense of presenting a petition. Then, on a signal, Tullius Cimber grabbed Caesar's toga, pulling it down from his shoulders, exposing him and signaling the attack to begin. Publius Servilius Casca struck first, a glancing blow to Caesar's neck. Caesar, stunned, reportedly cried out and tried to fight back, even stabbing Casca's arm with his stylus in self-defense. But it was far too late. The other conspirators closed in, each one stabbing Caesar in turn. Ancient historians recorded that he was struck 23 times, though only one wound, according to a Roman physician who later examined the body, was fatal. According to legend, when Caesar saw Brutus among his attackers, a man he trusted like a son, he stopped resisting entirely. The phrase history remembers, whether historically accurate or not, is devastatingly simple, et Brute? Even you, Brutus? Caesar fell at the base of a statue of his former rival, Pompey, blood pooling across the Senate floor, in the very institution he had spent his life trying to control. The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic. Brutus reportedly raised his bloodied dagger and called out to Cicero, celebrating the restoration of Roman liberty. But Rome did not react the way they expected. Instead of celebrating, the Roman public was horrified. Caesar had been enormously popular among ordinary citizens, and his brutal murder ignited outrage rather than relief. At Caesar's funeral, Mark Antony, Caesar's close ally, delivered a devastating public speech, reading Caesar's will aloud, revealing that he had left money directly to the Roman people. The crowd's grief turned rapidly into fury. Rioting broke out across Rome. The conspirators, who had expected to be hailed as liberators, were instead forced to flee the city for their own safety. What followed was not the restoration of the republic the conspirators had hoped for, but over a decade of brutal civil war, as Caesar's allies and rivals fought for control of Rome. Eventually, Caesar's own adopted heir, a young man named Octavian, emerged victorious, defeating both the conspirators and Mark Antony in turn. In 27 BCE, Octavian took a new name, Augustus, becoming Rome's first true emperor. The very thing the conspirators had killed Caesar to prevent, one man ruling Rome alone, happened anyway. Except now, it was permanent. The Roman Republic Brutus and Cassius died trying to save was gone forever. Julius Caesar's assassination remains one of history's most consequential murders, a killing meant to preserve freedom that instead ushered in centuries of imperial rule. Nearly 1700 years later, William Shakespeare immortalized this moment forever in his play Julius Caesar, cementing the phrase "et tu, Brute" permanently into the English language, whether or not Caesar ever actually spoke those exact words. 2,000 years later, his name is still spoken across the world, in law, in language, in the very calendar we use today, named for the month of his birth. Julius Caesar's death didn't end his legacy. It made it eternal.